Sometimes I read the Bible, and sometimes the Bible reads me. This is my experience every time I read, or rather encounter, Romans chapter 7. It's like there is some supernatural power moving through the text that sees into my soul. I don't just read it, I encounter it, I experience it, and it diagnoses my dilemma. It tells me things about myself that helps me see that there is some force out there that understands me, that gets me. It has explanatory power for human identity questions, like why do good people sometimes do bad things? Why do bad people sometimes do good things? Why do people we trust sometimes betray us? Why do people we don't trust sometimes come through for us? Why do Christian leaders fail? Why do Christians fail to forgive failed leaders? Why do each of us sometimes fail ourselves? And why do you sometimes fill in the blank? Why do you say, I'm going to go and do this absolutely, and then you don't? Or why do you say, I'm never going to do that again, and then you do? We all know this experience. It's universal. Why do we self-sabotage? And who is the real us? Is it the me who has the intention of doing the good thing? Or is it the me who sabotages myself from doing the good thing? Or is the real me made up of a blend of both? How does our identity work? This is the kind of stuff Romans chapter 7 addresses and what we're going to talk about today on Black Sheep Bible Study. This is a place of grace for those of us who need a fresh start and a second chance, which is really all of us, but only some of us know it. Hey, have you ever felt like a failure, like you're a black sheep, like you're on the outside looking in, like you can't just quite measure up? I hope you're encouraged to know that the Apostle Paul, the greatest writer, thinker, philosopher, theologian, and leader in the early church, sometimes felt like a black sheep. He felt like a failure. And in Romans chapter 7, he is vividly vulnerable in how he lets us see his own experience, and he uses his own experience to teach us some really valuable lessons. I'm especially talking about the last half of Romans 7, Romans 7 verses 14 to 25. So for the next few minutes, we're going to look at the context of this passage and then the text itself. And while we look at the text, we'll do our best to understand it, and then lastly, apply what we're learning. Okay, first the context. In the verses leading up to our passage, early on in Romans 7, the Apostle Paul is talking about the way of law versus the way of the Spirit that he's going to unpack in Romans 8. And he says the way of law, that is the way of dutifully just trying to follow the rules and regulations and rituals and routines of religion, he says it doesn't work. That's the old way. That's the Old Testament. That's the Old Covenant. The New Covenant is the way of the Spirit. And he's trying to get through to his followers that you don't try and blend the two. You are completely free from the one so you can live in the other. He says, in fact, you're so free, it's like you were once married to the law. It was your spouse, but now, he doesn't say, but now the law is dead. He says, now you're dead. That's how free you are. You're no longer married. It's like you are dead. That was your old self trying to walk in the way of religion. He says, but now there's a new you who is alive to the Spirit. So he will go on in Romans 8 to talk about the beautiful intimacy of life with the Spirit of God entering us. Now, in the middle of this, the Apostle Paul gets tremendously vulnerable. He uses his own experience to talk about how the law has not worked. The way of just living by rule keeping has not worked in his life. He switches from past tense in the verses leading up to this to present tense, starting in verse 14. And he continues in present tense for the rest of the chapter. He is using his present sometimes struggle as a teaching illustration for what it's like when you don't follow the way of the Spirit. He's letting us examine his own experience so that our hearts can be encouraged when it happens to us. He even uses one particular example. It's translated in many English translations as covetousness, but it's the regular word for lust, sometimes translated desire. And he says, that's what I struggle with. And the law just telling me don't do that didn't really help. So with that vulnerability as our background, let's get into the text and see what we can do to understand it as we go. Okay, beginning in verse 14, pay attention to how Paul uses the Greek pronoun ego, or I, to talk about himself, reflecting two different versions of the self. He says, we know, you see, that the law is spiritual. I, however, am made of flesh, sold as a slave under sin's authority. Oof, boy, he's having a bad day. I don't understand what I do. I don't do what I want, you see, but I do what I hate. So if I do what I don't want to do, I am agreeing that the law is good. My conscience still works. I believe that I should do the right thing. The 10 Commandments are heading me in the right direction. It's not that I'm throwing all that away. It's that I just don't always do it. Who is the real I? Theologians call this the divided I, the cloven ego. And 2,000 years later, psychiatrists like Freud would have something to say about this. But before Freud works this through with the ego, the id, and the superego, the Apostle Paul got here first. And he's doing some brilliant psychology as well as theology. This is what we call theological anthropology, kind of dissecting the human soul from God's point of view, and we see something amazing. We're going to go on to learn that our identity resides not just in the sum total of our good thoughts and deeds and impulses versus our bad thoughts, deeds, and impulses, but the who we really are is someone deeper. Let's continue. But now it is no longer I that do it. It's sin living within me. I know, you see, that no good thing lives in me, that is, in my human flesh, for I can will the good, but I can't perform it. For I don't do the good things I want to do, but I end up doing the evil thing I don't want to do. So if I do what I don't want to do, it's no longer I doing it, it's sin living inside me. Now, here the Apostle Paul is talking about sin, singular, not sins, plural, not all the bad things you've done, but sin as a force, as a kind of virus, as a flaw in our code that is somehow deteriorating the way our will works to carry out the things we actually want to do. The word Paul uses for sin here is fascinating. It's hamartia. It's a compound word from meaning not. It's a negation word. Like we talk about atheists being non-theists. They don't believe in God. It's the a negation, pronounced ha, and meros, meaning to be a part of, to have a share with, to be together with. And so hamartia, the word for sin, means to be not together with where you should be. It was eventually used as an archery term to mean you've missed the mark. You failed to hit the bullseye. The arrow is not together with where it's supposed to be. But here it means that there is a force inside us pulling us apart. Hey man, I don't have it together. That's sin. And so sometimes people will say, well, I don't really like the word sin. It sounds guilt-inducing and religious. Fine. Come up with your own word, whatever you want. But you and I have to admit it exists. Whatever this force is, whatever this deteriorative agent is in the world, it exists. The world is not the way it should be. It's not the way it could be. You and I, we're not the way we could be. There's something wrong. There's a force at work. Hamartia, a pulling apart force. It's like relational rust. It deteriorates the bonds of relationship with God, with each other. There's something going wrong in our relationships with each other and in our relationship with ourselves. So, whoa, the Apostle Paul has a theological anthropology of himself, that his true self is not this versus this, trying to duke it out, but there's a deeper self that actually wants to do the right thing, that wants to be close to God, that loves him. And the negative side, that force of sin, resides in what he calls our flesh, or the members of our body. He'll get to that here. Now, it could sound like Paul's just making an excuse. Well, I don't actually do anything wrong. That's just sin living in me that does something wrong, but it's not me. Sure, you could use it as an excuse. Every truth could be used as an excuse for something bad, but it doesn't make it not true. What this truth is designed to do is to help me get in tune with who I really am and to live out of the center of my soul. Paul goes on to say, this then is what I find about the law. When I want to do what is right, evil lies close at hand. Well, that's an echo back to the Genesis story of Genesis chapter 4, where God is having a conversation with Cain, who eventually murdered his brother Abel. And God says to Cain before that happens, he says, sin is crouching at your door. It desires, again, it's sin, singular, as a power or corrosive force. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. There's the human battle from the dawn of written history. So Paul goes on to say, I delight in God's law, you see. It's not just the 10 Commandments, but it's God's way, God's morality. I delight in it according to my inmost self. That's my inner anthropos, my inward humanity. But I see another law, another way of living, another force in my limbs and organs, this translation says. Paul uses the word for members or body parts, parts of my body, limbs and organs, fighting a battle against the law of my mind and taking me off into captivity in the law of sin, which is in my limbs and organs. So Paul says, my mind is the true me. But my mind is encased in flesh, and all of my limbs and organs, he's being kind of poetic here, are each pulling me in a different direction that is not really where my mind, my true self, wants to go. Our minds are encased and express themselves through our brains, which is also flesh and can misfire and can have things wrong with them. But our true selves, God sees that. Our true spirit is something more than the prefrontal lobe of our cerebral cortex. The true you, the true me, is deeper, and God wants to commune with us there. He'll talk about that in Romans 8. So using this poetic image of the members of our body, the different limbs and organs, is where sin lies. It's like Paul is saying, I know I shouldn't eat more, but my stomach wants me to. I know I shouldn't say those things, but my mouth wants to. And sometimes I fly off the handle and say things I shouldn't say. I know I shouldn't listen to that gossip, but I do. My ear wants me to. I know I shouldn't have that sex, but my genitals want me to. I know I shouldn't go to that place, but my feet want to take me there. I know I shouldn't punch that person in the mouth, but my hand sure wants to. He says it feels like there's something at work through all the parts of my body that is trying to get me to go off course. So finally, Paul just cries out, what a miserable person I am. Who is going to rescue me from the body of this death? The word for miserable here, sometimes translated wretched, is taleoporos. It's a compound word from the word for weight or strain and the word for calluses or being bent out of shape by that weight. Paul is saying, I feel like the weight of my own failure. The sin and the shame that I carry with me is bending my soul out of shape. I'm developing calluses. Sometimes the only way we can deal with that kind of shame is to just stop feeling altogether. Paul is tempted to go down that road, but there's a better way. We need someone to rescue us from this body of death. Now, here's something fascinating. At the time Paul was writing, Virgil, the Roman poet who had written a century earlier, was widely read, and most historians believe Paul has an image in mind from one of Virgil's poems. Virgil writes about an evil ruler who would give the death sentence to murderers in a way that would torture them to death, and it's horribly gruesome. Here's an English translation that kind of keeps the poetic lilt of Virgil's poem. He writes, the living and the dead at his command were coupled face to face and hand to hand, till choked with stench in loathed embraces tied, the lingering wretches pined away and died. Are you catching this? He's saying that if someone was found guilty of murder, they were tied to the corpse of the person they killed, face to face, hand to hand, body to body, and over time, the decay, the decomposition, the disease of the dead corpse would infect them, and they would die by being killed by the one they killed. And most historians believed this was a common image at the time, and the Apostle Paul is alluding to this when he says, who will deliver me from this body of death? That's how Paul is feeling. He's not denying that he is guilty of doing wrong, but is there no mercy? Is there no mercy for those of us who mess up to say, I want out, I want to be free, I want to start my life all over again? So Paul says that's what Jesus does. He rescues us from our own death and decay. He recreates us and he relates to us as who we truly are and helps us get to know who we truly are so we can live out of our center rather than from our circumference. And then he begins the next chapter, Romans chapter 8, by saying, so therefore, there is now no condemnation for those in the Messiah, Jesus. For those of us in Christ Jesus who turn to him for rescue, there is now no condemnation. It's like he's taken Judgment Day and he's dragged and dropped it from the future into the present, and he's already declared you not guilty, no condemnation. You have nothing to fear going forward. And you can live now with the Spirit inside you, helping your spirit grow stronger. That's what Romans 8 is about. But for now, let's look at some applications of Romans 7. First, we need to receive and we need to give loads of grace. Man, being human is complex. So when we mess up, Let God love us through it. And when others mess up, make sure we pass on the forgiveness, reconciliation, restoration, mercy that we ourselves have received. B. Romans 7 describes a state to which we might revert, but should not remain. When you have a Romans 7 experience, when you mess up, it may be a one-off, it may be a season of life, a series of bad choices. Just remember, this may be part of your story, but it doesn't have to be part of your identity. You might revert, but you don't have to remain. We can always take a deep breath and move into Romans 8. And that's exactly what we do. Romans 8 is about the breath of God. It's the same word for spirit. We learn to breathe deep in relationship with the Spirit. Move on. Romans 8 is waiting for you. And C, we were made not for law-based religion, but for love-based intimacy with the Almighty. Romans 8 will go on to talk about the love of God that we were designed to live in partnership with. We'll talk more about that in other videos, but for now I want to say go read Romans 7 and 8. And if you can think of someone who this might be helpful for, please share this with them. Thanks for hanging out with me today on Black Sheep Bible Study.